Assalamu alaikum girls, and welcome again to our new tutorial where I'll be showing you how to sew this enchanted layered maxi skirt. So I actually came up with the name after I tried on the skirt because it's just made me feel like so magical. I just love how it feels, like it flowy and all that kind. It just makes me feel like a Disney princess. That's what I think. But it's okay if that didn't make sense to you. I'll just talk to you about the materials we need. So you're gonna need a 2-meter lightweight chiffon fabric, 2-meter Georgette fabric, and the size of the fabrics will determine how much gathers you'd get. So if you want lots of gathers, you can increase the size of your fabric to 3 or 4 or 5, whatever you like. And you also need elastic the size of your waist, your hemming foot, and of course your sewing supplies. So let's get started. Okay, so first of all, I laid down the chiffon fabric onto the floor, folded it into half. This can be a very tricky task because you're using flowy fabric, so you might want to place a large newspaper or tissue paper under the fabric first to avoid all the slipping and stuff. So next, using my measurement tape, starting from the folded corner, I measured 38" and marked it. I went all around from the folded edge till the top so that I had a quarter circle like a pie. You can see this in this image. Next, I connected all the marks together and I cut it using my sharp shears. So in the end, I had something like this. I've labeled everything in this image, in this shot. You can see that. That there's the circular edge over there, and then there's the folded edge, and then there's the straight edge. So you might want to refer to this shot again if you get stuck. Okay, now I'm gonna fold my circular edge using my hem foot. So using this foot can be a little tricky at first, especially if you're using a slippery fabric like in this tutorial. So you might want to practice it first using a scrap fabrics. So before I begin, I am gonna fold the edge. First, I'm gonna finger press the edge, and I'm gonna fold and sew it using my thread and needle. You can see that I haven't tied any knots at the end of the thread. This is just to make it easier because it's really hard to keep it folded after inserting it inside. So to make sure that it's folded perfectly when you keep it under the needle, you can just use this tip. And then I just inserted the edge into the hole and started sewing. You have to slide your fabric inside that little folded hole kind of thing. And you need to go really slow and make sure you stop every once in a while to make sure that things are going fine. And you can should always remember that you can always use your seam ripper if you make any mistakes. The next task is to sew the Georgette piece to the chiffon. So I place the top piece onto the bottom so that the wrong side of the top piece is facing the right side of the bottom. Now I'm gonna pin them together first. And this is how it should look like after you have done all your pinning. So you have to sew all along the direction shown by the arrow in this shot on the top edge. I used the standard 5x8 inch seam allowance. I added this tape where the scale says 5x8 to help me guide so I don't make any mistakes, and I sew completely straight. Next, I'm gonna trim the seam allowance into half to avoid the bulk because it's just a useless thing. And then using my zigzag stitch, I finished off my seam allowance. One thing that I wanted to say here is if you really like these videos, please do share them with your friends and families, and don't forget to interact because that's how I'd know that I'm doing something worthwhile here. So please go ahead and like and comment and share whatever you can do. And thanks so much for just watching and being around. Okay, enough of the boring talk. So here's what this should look like after you have finished off your seam allowance. Moving on to the next step. What I did next was take the two edges of my straight piece, two straight edges of my piece, and folded them into half. Top piece might just come into the seam, but that's totally okay. I'm gonna fold and sew it so that it makes a square kind of thing, or you can call it a skirt without elastic. So you can see that a little bit of the circular thing is coming in the seam, but it's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and pin this all along the edge. After pinning the two sides together, I'm just gonna go ahead and sew it using the 5x8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I will go ahead and trim it, and I will finish it off just like I did it in the previous step. And since it is a side seam, I'm gonna press it to give it a finished look. Now it's time to fold to make your elastic casing. But before doing that, I basted this seam into the fabric so that it doesn't interfere while I'm inserting the elastic. It's just a basting stitch and it's not a construction stitch. And then I measured the amount I needed to fold to make the waistband using my elastic as a reference. So my elastic is around 0.5 inch, so I folded the edge by 5 by 8 of an inch. And then I pressed it in place using my measurement tape to make sure I folded exactly 5 by 8 of an inch all around. So the pressing's all done. I'm gonna sew it in place using this line as my seam guide. Since we have like two fabrics and they're very slippery, you gotta make sure that you sew it in such a way that the one fabric does not slip over and comes under the stitch and just ruin the whole look. I'm also gonna leave around 2 to 3 inch of gap to make sure for a place to insert my elastic later. If you think that you're gonna forget it, that you have to leave a hole, you can just mark it off with a pin. Or if you do forget to leave a hole, you can just use your seam ripper and rip off the stitches for around 3 to 4 inches, whatever is comfortable for you. Okay, so that's all done. After that, I measured the elastic I needed by measuring around my waist where I normally wear my pants or my skirts. Next, I inserted the elastic into the casing using the pen cap. All you gotta do is insert the cap into the casing and gather fabric around the cap and then pull from one side. So if you keep on going this way, eventually you'll have the elastic through the whole casing. You can also use a large safety pin, but it's okay to use the cap too. In this last step, I just sewed the elastic ends together using a zigzag stitch from top as well as the bottom, because it's just stronger that way, and all your strength goes onto your elastic, so it's very essential that they are sewn in together extremely strongly. And finally, I close up the hole right here using the normal stitch. And this also marks the end of our tutorial. Do let me know if you love the skirt in the comments below. And don't forget to share this video if you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.